Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite. What comes to mind?
You are listening to Scream with Ryan C. Showers, the podcast for Scream fans just like you. Join Ryan every week as he takes a deep dive into the horror film series that defined the 90s and redefined the genre. Scream with Ryan C. Showers is your source for scene and quote analysis, character dissections, and the latest news about upcoming installments of the Scary Movie franchise.
I hear you like horror movies, Kirby, but do you like them as much as him?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Scream with Ryan C. Showers podcast, where the film critic meets the Scream fan twice a week, every Tuesday and Friday. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Now, before I go any further, I need to thank the producers of Scream with Ryan C. Showers. They include Ashley Summers from the Squirrel and Spud Shop. She and I host a Scream game every Wednesday on Instagram, so please check that out. I also need to thank TJ Jones, who comes from the Box Office Buds podcast. He is responsible for all of the graphic design of Scream with Ryan C. Showers in terms of new episode cards on social media promotion. So thank you so much to TJ for all he does. I also need to thank contributors Mark Karim, Mark Vieira, and Joey Velisi. Joey Velisi is the guy who writes the scripts for Scream with Ryan C. Showers. Episode 112, we wrote a Scream 7 script, which I read out loud, about the end of the Carpenter sisters storyline. And then the sequel to that was called Screams. It was centered around the legacy of Gail Weathers. That's episode 155. And Joey is currently working on the final Scream, which this is a product that is going to examine the relationship, the marriage of Mark and Sidney. Unlike the real Scream 7, this will feature Mark Kincaid as Sidney's husband, and she won't have a teenage daughter. Both of her daughters will be young, so it'll be much different than the real Scream 7 we're going to get. But that is going to be coming to the podcast late summer, early fall, so please tune in for that. I need to thank everybody over at Patreon. Thank you to everybody who subscribes to the Patreon at any and every tier. I'm an independent entity, so any bit of support that comes into the Patreon goes back into the podcast. Joining the Patreon gets you ad-free and early access to every episode, as well as the opportunity to join the community of the show. We have group chats across social media. In particular, Instagram is really the hub of the podcast community. More importantly, joining the Patreon is the vessel in which you would use to come onto the podcast, either in a one-on-one situation with me or a small panel. In addition, there's a guaranteed invite every month to a big group Zoom recording about a Scream topic. An exciting feature of the podcast is the audio commentary episodes. Every Scream fan knows what it was like listening to Wes Craven do the audio commentaries for the original trilogy and Scream 4, with Marianne Maddalena and Kevin Williamson and Patrick Lussier. And what I'm trying to do for my Patreon subscribers is I am going to be performing an audio commentary of a Scream or a Scream-related movie, one per month, every month. And my goal is to try to approach these as I'm doing deep analytical analysis about the characters, about the themes, about just general reaction. So it's something that I'm really proud of and I hope continues to be a cherished part of the podcast. So the commentary is available as a normal podcast episode for anybody to listen to like they would any other podcast, but it will also be available as a video watch along. So everybody, please go over to Patreon, subscribe to Scream with RCS. I would be eternally grateful. So I need to go through and thank everybody over at Patreon who is subscribed as a stab investor or a daddy/mama Ghostface. So the daddy/mama Ghostface of the Patreon are Carrie Tenney, Brett Janovich, Corey Wilson, and Stevie Shears. The stab investors include Allie, Mark Karim, Tamika Jones, David D., Garrison Nichols, Gustavo Mora, Jess Mariano, Joey Nobarini, aka The Vault, Josh Calamari, Josh Carr, Scream Queens podcast, both Josh and Justine, The Horror Project podcast, Justin Weir, Kevin Abner, Mark Vieira, PWO5, aka Philip Douglas, Quentin Harrison, and Sam Levy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Scream with Ryan C. Showers. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers. Oh my gosh, I have been wanting to do this episode for a long time. So this was one of the episodes that was suggested to me by the Patreon. So I sent out a survey in March. Ashley and I worked really hard on that and kind of like asking people, who are part of the Patreon, like, hey, is there something you want to cover with me on the show? Or do you have a great idea for, new episode that I haven't done before? There were many amazing suggestions, and you'll see a bunch of them as we proceed in into season 5 over the summer. But this one, I kind of envisioned this as like the season 4 capper in a lot of ways. It's not the last episode of season 4 to be like the finale, but it definitely is in spirit because we are looking forward to the future that lies ahead of us after Scream 7, or I guess in conjunction with Scream 7 and beyond. So everybody, please welcome one of my favorite guests, Josh Reinhold. Hey, Josh.
Hi, Ryan.
I am so happy to be sitting here with you.
Same. It feels like it's been a long time coming. We've been going back and forth about this for a while now.
I'm going to let that Taylor Swift thing that you just said slide, so we can just keep it going.
Wait, what was Taylor Swift about that?
It's been a long time coming. It's been a long time coming. It's Miss Americana and the Heartbreak Prince is what she says to open the Eras tour. God.
I don't even see. I didn't even know. She's using me as a medium, apparently.
And you both have connections to Kansas City now, and it's just like, you should know this, Josh. You were on the Delicate episode. I gave you the Delicate song to do, and that is like a treasure, and you can't get with it, man.
It's true. Like, apparently all roads lead to Kansas City. I'm just chasing Taylor, ultimately.
We love that. So, listener, Josh was first on, he's been on several times in many episodes in different forms, whether it's group Zooms or, so he was on episode 175, which was this big episode that we did kind of talking about the industry and talking about Sidney's role and like the way that Nev was being discussed. Like, that was like the big episode I did about this topic back in September. My friend Jacob was a part of that, Jess, Ashley, and Josh. Josh had a huge part of that. And it's a great episode. And Josh was amazing on it. But my favorite recent appearance by Josh was he sent me a voice memo describing the Taylor Swift song Delicate and Sidney and like her journey through like her potential love interests as applied to that song, and it blew my socks off. Like, that was so cool. So I'm happy to have Josh here talking about more than just Taylor Swift, though, because he is a wealth of knowledge about Scream. So welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so in preparation for this podcast, you insisted on rewatching the series, and I was the beneficiary of your live texts, your live reaction. So why don't you tell everybody what your most up-to-date ranking is of the Scream franchise?
So my most up-to-date ranking is a tie between 2 and 3 for first. Followed by 1, 5, 4, 6.
This is shocking because like this could honestly this could be my ranking on a given day, because I love 2 and 3. 3 is obviously my favorite, but they're pretty equal to me. And your texts about 3 were overwhelming to me. So why don't you tell everybody what your experience was watching Scream 3 this time?
Yeah, I would say that I kind of think of 2 as Gail's most like kind of personal epic arc, where Gail starts at 2 and where she ends in it. And I think, sorry, I'm starting just with 2 to contrast them, but I think I love 2 has this very like collegey, pulpy, fun, glossy feeling about it that I think appeals to a lot of fans who just love the sort of like popcorn element of Scream. And then I think what I realized this time watching 3 is that it's the most I relate to Sidney in any of the films. And also that Gail has kind of quietly transformed into this full-blown protector of Sidney in 3. It's like even Gail's investigation in that film feels so different. It feels like she's doing it as like almost like a lioness or something, right? Who's like trying to protect her cubs. Like, she's also kind of shielding Sidney from some of what she's learning, it seems, until she can really figure it out. And then there are all these really cool moments I hadn't noticed before where Gail is, especially in the final set piece in the house, where off screen Gail is like screaming with like the kind of emotion of a mother out of concern for Sidney. So this time 3 just hit me differently. I think the family element is really strong. And when you reflect on all the ghost faces, Roman is like, I think he kind of has to be number 1 for me, just because his motive feels, there's no bullshit in it, right? Like, I think the further we get into the franchise, it starts to feel cheaper and cheaper why these people go on these killing sprees. But Roman's is so deeply personal. So yeah, it just kind of, I had learned to like 3 more over the years, to be fair, especially listening to the podcast, respecting your opinion and revisiting it. But I don't necessarily re-watch all the films as much as I think some of our other friends in the Patreon do. And it had been a while, and I don't know what was different in the air, but
Well, that's it. And Joey Valisi, who is, of course, like a very treasured person to the podcast, like he described it as like its two greatest accomplishments are that it's epic and that it's emotional. So true when you think about the movie and how it concludes the trilogy. You're on the wavelength of the emotions that Scream 3 is playing with, or you're not.
yeah.
And that's been something for me to communicate to the audience over the past 5 years of this podcast. And I think that the emotions of Scream 3, not only with Sidney, but with Gail and Dewey and the finale in general, are really important. And like, I was kind of flying high when you were talking about Gail in Scream 3 because like, as Sidney is my girl in Scream 3. I mean, that's literally the thesis statement of this podcast is about her in Scream 3. But over the years, and I'm somebody who used to swear by Gail in Scream 2, and I still do. And Scream 2 probably is still my favorite. But there's a part of me that really thinks that like when I watch Scream 3, Sidney, Gail, and Dewey are all at their best. The trio is like they're all like these like dragons, that have completely transformed from 1 to 2 and then 2 to 3, and that they're all at their best. So in some ways, Gail does feel like she's at her best, and like hearing your reaction to her and your analysis of her, even like little things. I remember you talking about like how Gail, when she's at the window listening to Dewey and Jennifer talking, and like then the way she interacts with the two of them in the fax machine sequence, which is my least favorite part of the movie. But Gail is so great there, and there's so much there to talk about her. You said something really funny to me, which I won't repeat on air, about her dynamic with those two at that time. But it just really goes to
Wait,
show.
what? Was it bad? I don't
You're like,
wait, I don't
you're,
remember.
you're like, yes. You're like, I could identify with her. It's like, yes, I'll save your life, even though you're fucking somebody else. And it's just like, but like, she is very deep in Scream 3, and you have to really be plugged in to see the growth from 1 to 3. That's most prominent in 2, right? To really get her in Scream 3. So when people criticize her and say that like she's like Courtney Cox is playing Monica Geller in Scream 3, that criticism to me just makes me want to puke. But go ahead.
I don't get that one like at all. And I guess I've never heard it. Yeah, it's very clear that film by film, Gail's relationship to like her own it goes from investigative journalism that's obviously kind of cutthroat, but still not. The thing about Gail in 1 is that everybody likes to sort of worship her in the sort of Regina George, like really like cutthroat female, like the gays loves to stan type of character. But at the same time, I have a lot of sympathy for Gail in the first one because when you really think about it, she's like a sort of younger on the rise reporter working a local beat. I mean, this is a national story, but it's clear that she's not in the big leagues, and she's probably facing so much sexism, so much misogyny. And really, all she's trying to do is fight to get the truth out, which she's researched and believes in. And unfortunately, that flies in the face of what Sidney thinks is her truth. But at the end of the day, it's like Gail is hardened in 1, but who wouldn't be in the industry she's in as a woman? You know what
And
I'm
she's
saying?
correct. That's the thing that
Yeah.
people forget about her, is that everything that she says, like, so that scene with her and Sidney outside the school, one of my favorite scenes in Scream 1. Gail is 100% correct. Like, we can identify with Sidney emotionally, and that's what the movie wants us to. But at the end of the day, Gail is correct about every single thing that she says there. And it's just kind of this moment, I think, that almost kind of defines their relationship. And like Sidney, I think that Sidney, in her mind, she thinks that she has to be right in order to have some peace. And Gail challenges that. And I think that because there's that very delicate relationship between them in 1, I think that's why it takes so long for that relationship between Gail and Sidney that you're discussing in Scream 3 to kind of thaw and fall into place, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So yeah, I'm definitely now officially a convert, and it's tied. I like them for different reasons, and as I told you, and when I was texting you in real time, I think one thing that maybe some of the other people in the Patreon that don't rank 3 as high might be feeling, or this is just me trying to analyze, like, why did it take me this long to like this movie this much? And I think it's one of the most, like, the tone of 3 sits in like 2 very different places, and that happens in a lot of Scream movies where like they introduce a bunch of characters who are going to get killed. Usually they're young. In the case of Scream 3, it's the cast of Stab 3. I think that those characters almost feel like they're in the wrong film when you contrast the scenes, the dialogue, the approach, and the sort of lack of depth to how they're moving through the events to the way that, the trio is,
Right.
which is with like the ultimate sense of gravity and like what the fuck, we thought this was over, what does this mean, we're not even in Woodsboro. So I think that that is one of the critiques that like will remain for me about 3, but I think that it's a flaw that nevertheless the strengths of the film sort of supersede.
How I interpret a response to that, or how I feel about that, is that Scream 3 is about the trio, and by extension, Jennifer, Roman, and Kincaid. Like those are like the main players. Like you have the A players, the B players, and then the Stab 3 cast is the C players. And I think you really care about A and B to an extent, but then the C players don't matter because like, each of the Stab 3 actors, they're almost like, they're emblematic of like a larger issue or a social issue. They're representing something so I can excuse their vapidness because they're there as a token of a cultural conversation. And
Right.
so, and because so much work is going into the trio and to the B tier, in different areas, meaning Kincaid or Roman or Jennifer in different parts of the film, like I can kind of excuse it because it's like the film feels so complete without having to know where Sarah Darling went to high school and what Tyson's favorite place to go out to eat is. You know what I mean? So it's just like I think that it all balances out.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I think all those characters and like the choice to have them and what they represented, like the small town girl who's discovered and like how did that happen in a Hollywood context, and like, actually having a Black character as part of like the main friend group and whatever, like all works. I think it's just about how they wrote them in the scenes, and I think there could have been ways without like getting lost in the weeds of like who they all were and giving them full arcs for us to feel a little bit more endeared to them, invested in them before they go. Kind of like Jada Pinkett Smith and Omar Epps in the opening of 2.
Right.
I feel like that was just like a fucking grand slam in terms of commenting on something, like responding to comments about the first film in a way that at first you're like, oh my God, they're really going to kill both of them first. And then when you like step back and look at it, it's like a Black woman screaming for help and a bunch of white people cheering on as she dies. It's like an epic sort of takedown of American culture. So, I just think like, not that they needed to do that with everybody in 3, but I think if they'd found a few more moments to kind of hit on all cylinders like that, it probably would have elevated the film to a place where people would have been less resistant to the really great stuff happening with the trio.
No, I agree 100%. And it's just, and see, here's the thing. Here's what I like about Josh. Okay, he is not somebody who is chasing toxic positivity, and because I am not that person either. Sometimes people think that I am because people think that there's like this, like, some people will tell you like, oh, Ryan C. Showers only likes people who like Scream 3, and that's not the case. I enjoy hearing real opinions from real people and not like vapid recycled bits of toxic positivity or like almost like robotic things that trickle down that like say you have to like this movie because of this. And like, and I actually got a nasty comment a few weeks ago about being quote negative, and I don't think that I'm negative. I think that I'm objective in certain places, and it's about explaining your opinions. And I don't really have any time for people who are worried about always being so positive. Oh my God, let's just be positive. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, you do not live in the real world. Like, I'm not here to cater to your precious toxically positive feelings. So anyways, I love that about Josh, because like he always, the thing about Josh is he always checks, whenever you have people who do kind of lean into toxic positivity, I go to Josh and he checks it. It's like, even we were talking about a movie that I really enjoyed, I talked about on the podcast, and Josh is like, actually, no, it's not that great. And then it makes me think and check myself and be like, oh, okay, because like it's good to have dissenting opinions. It's good to have all points of view, not just the, oh my God, guys, this is so great. Like, so Josh.
Yeah, no, 100%. I love debate. I've met like one of my longest running relationships, we literally met arguing on the street. Like not arguing, debating, And like to me that's just like it's so fun. Yeah, so I really enjoy debating people. I also don't so this is something that I have to like remind myself that it's a way in which I'm not like others, is that it does not personally offend me when someone does not enjoy something that I do or
Right.
disagrees with my take on something that I enjoy. Like you're saying, it's like I find that actually intriguing. And a lot of times it will make me go back and maybe come out with a slightly different opinion. I don't know everything. I certainly don't pick up on every little thing in every film I see. So when somebody comes to me and says, like, I think you might have missed X, Y, and Z, I'm super happy to go back and like, it's not every single time that I come out feeling differently, but I just don't really understand the culture that has led to like even film critics being afraid to critique anything.
Yeah. And that's actually a really chilling way to say it. Film critics being afraid to critique anything. Like that is the reality that we're living in, and unfortunately. And I appreciate that. And like, you know what, you remind me so much of me. There are some Patreons and some people I've made friends with over this podcast who remind me of myself. And like you definitely have that like spirit about like very like, intellectual curiosity about film and like the way that you read film and the way that you are not afraid to look at film with a red pen, if that makes sense, and like see what's actually working, see what's not working, and kind of trace why. What was at the root of that problem? So it's part of the reasons that I love you so much. So all right, so listener, Josh and I have two episodes after this one planned, which I'm really excited about. And I mentioned the other day on an episode with my friend Jess that like Jess and I sometimes like create magic with folks whenever like there's like an idea that one of us sends to the other, and then like it leads to voice memos all weekend, and this is like, oh my gosh, we have an episode. Well, Josh and I are going to be doing an episode covering the movie Drop and the movie Sinners, because these are we had very passionate conversations about these, and I want to cover them over the summer sometime, like down the road. So that's definitely in the can. But also, I'm so excited about this. Josh and I are going to have a very special Gale Weathers episode coming in a couple of weeks, and I don't want to delve too much into the details, but it's really great. And for me, like the episode I did recently about Sidney, it was about her character development scenes. Like it's kind of like that. My goal is for it to be the comparable version of that episode for Gale Weathers, and we have a really amazing outline. So to be continued about that. So
I can't wait for that one. I feel like it's like I remember when you were like it's like any of my friends that are like stressed out. Like I have a bunch of friends studying right now for their like master psalm, exams, and I almost feel like that about like doing an episode about Gale Weathers. It just feels like it's like on a tier that I'm like, wait, am I even worthy?
you are absolutely worthy. So the one last thing I want to throw to Josh before we get to our main topic here is we had the box office buds on a few weeks ago for a discussion of the Scream 7 box office predictions. And I'm very proud of that episode. And honestly, I feel like that episode kind of consumed the month of May, because like I feel like there was so much discussion about box office and the idea of like the release of a movie. And I think Final Destination Bloodlines coming out, the box office buds were the beginning of that discussion. Bloodlines was like the end of that discussion, because it was just so much in the air. So you had some strong reactions whenever that episode dropped. So do you have anything you want to add here?
Well, mostly I just loved that episode so much, and I was walking my dog listening to the podcast in my AirPods, as I tend to do, and I just kept wanting to jump in. So I think I just had like total podcast envy of that conversation. I think there were a couple of things that I was like, I would have added to the conversation. One of them being, I know that Valentine's Day came up as like a huge missed opportunity, right? And talking about releasing the film earlier. I Here's one thing I will say, like with my, limited to moderate experience in the film industry, if there are people who I trust to not make a stupid, obvious mistake, like an unforced error, it's the people that work in distribution at the studios. I have full faith that Paramount has done like that meme with the woman and all the math symbols around her, in deciding to land on the weekend they're on. And The bottom line is this: that is a constantly, changing. And if they reach a point where they really feel like we are not setting this film up, if moving it, the release up, like works for them, I have full faith that they will do that. Or if moving it back makes more sense, I have full faith that they will do that. I did a little bit of looking, and there is that Margot Robbie, Jacob Elordi coming out over Valentine's, and I could see that being something they want to stay away from. It's Wuthering Heights. Like, I don't know how many people are really going to be lining up, but those are kind of, if we have movie stars anymore, those are kind of two of them, right? So, yeah.
I kind of land the same place that you did just now about like, if there is going to be a problem, I feel rest assured that Paramount is going to recognize it and
Right.
move it in whatever they decide. But I don't, whatever. I think that there are opportunities, like, for instance, I don't think Valentine's Day is the day to do it. I think actually like the week before has nothing slated so far, and it would actually be the corresponding week with Scream 3. So funny enough, so it would be Friday the 6th of February. That's an option, but I think I'm as of right now, I'm predicting it not to move. I think it's going to be fine. So I have two follow-up questions for you, and then we're going to get on to the main topic. One, do you think Cat in the Hat is a problem for Scream 7? Do you think Scream 7 will be number 1 or number 2 at the box office? And then following that up, the big conversation about the box office buds was this idea of Scream 7 kind of being like this like Halloween 2018 kind of moment, like this big return, so what are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So that I hate to cop out and kind of say that it's really impossible to predict or tell. I think this is going to depend so much on how both films look and how they're perceived by audiences. I think everything that you guys talked about with Scream 7 having all the makings of being a huge event are there. I think I know some of the brilliant people that will be putting that marketing campaign together, and I am certain that they will seize upon so many creative opportunities that we can't even, think about because it's not our job and it's not on our radar to make Scream 7 as big of an event as they can. I think with Cat in the Hat, having sat in meetings like this, my main fear, because most people I think would be like, I don't really think that's the same audience. The problem is Cat in the Hat has the potential to be a true like 4-quadrant film. And if it is, and it's a family film, younger parents, millennials, people our age, my age, I guess, who have kids, they're gonna often prioritize the film, like on opening weekend, they're gonna prioritize the film that like can be an event with the kids. So I could see it ending up in second place to Cat in the Hat, but that's if Cat in the Hat is like a roaring success. And I don't necessarily think that means that there isn't still room out there for Scream to open to a number similar to Final Destination Bloodlines. That opening utterly shocked me. I don't know if I would have been less shocked if I still was privy to sort of tracking and projections. And I haven't really looked into whether, anyone internally was expecting that to happen. But I would be pretty surprised if they did. I would guess I would imagine they were just like hoping to hit 30 and feel good about that. So to break 50 was really, really surprising.
So my episode I just recorded and released on this past Friday was about Final Destination and kind of looking at the Rotten Tomatoes and looking at the box office. So just historically, Scream has always done better than Final Destination, like at the box office. Like, Scream was always, 30 million-ish for the sequels for the opening weekend. Final Destination, it ranged between 10 and 20. And then, of course, Scream 6 had 44, Final Destination Bloodlines 51. So it's just hard for me to believe that we are in a world where Scream 7 is going to do less than Final Destination Bloodlines. I don't know.
Yeah.
Based on history and like the pattern of Scream always having the edge over Final Destination Bloodlines, and then you combine like the stars and the characters and like that franchise doesn't have. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I'm going to be watching closely to see what happens with I Know What You Did Last Summer. I think that could be another sign. It doesn't necessarily predict what will happen with Scream 7, but I think if that momentum feels like people are excited about these sort of older IP being brought back in new iterations. If that's a strong opening, I think it just bodes extremely well for Scream 7. I could see Scream 7 like being this massive moment. I just think it's a moment that has to be seized. Like we've talked about the casual fans of Scream who to varying degrees are or aren't aware of Nev and which movies after 3 she's even in, if she's in them. They certainly aren't aware of the drama. They aren't aware that she wasn't in Scream 6 or that she was in Scream 5. So I think the smart thing for everybody to do is to almost make it feel like this is a way bigger return than it actually is, so
Yeah.
that people that loved these movies in the 90s are like, oh yeah, like it's time. Like I've kind of been sleeping on this, but I need to go see this one. Everybody's back. Nev is back. I think if they land that plane, it could open, I mean, it could be huge. Like I think didn't somebody on that episode predict like a really high number? Like
Someone said 60.
okay, yeah. And I think that's possible. I don't know, given the cat in the hat of it all, but that movie to me feels very hit or miss. Like it's either going to be incredible and have almost like I don't want to say a Barbie-like moment because I just don't think anyone's like sitting around really dying for Cat in the Hat. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think there was a lot more just anticipation and excitement
I don't want to
around
speak for
both.
everybody, but I don't think anyone's sitting around for
But I
Cat in the
will.
Hat. That's so funny. Oh my God. That's so funny.
Oh my
my
God.
God.
I'm so glad I'm not on Twitter or Blue Sky or anything because I'd probably just be getting like hammered by Cat in the Hat stands for the next week.
Oh my God. I don't want to
Rhyming,
speak for
ripping
everybody.
me to shreds and iambic pentameter and rhyming.
This is now a new meme of the podcast. I don't want to speak for everybody. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. No, I think that you're right. And I think like, again, like Josh and I had this really amazing conversation a few days ago, and I incorporated it into my conversation with Jess for the Hallow Scream episode, is this idea of the casual viewer. And like, again, people who saw Scream in the 90s when it was like really hot and like remember it, but probably missed Scream 4 because it didn't really make much of an impact, may have known about Scream 5 and 6, knew that Nev wasn't the driving force in them or even that she wasn't in them, and then thinking there's been so many endless sequels and oh, she's finally coming back. This is so cool. I'll definitely see that, especially Matthew Lillard's back, Courtney Cox, of course, Kevin Williamson. This sounds like a huge homecoming. So I think that that's going to be very easy to achieve. And like, yes, I mean, even though it's hard with Nev because like, right, she was the lead of Scream 4, but that's an ensemble cast, right? And then you have 5 where she was in it, but not really, and 6 where
Right.
it wasn't in it at all. So it's complicated, but I think that actually selling that this is the return of Sidney will be easier than fans who recognize the nuances of Sidney's importance to each movie. I think that
Right.
for the general audiences, they'll get it more than we are able to process sitting here, knowing the nuances of Sidney. And speaking of Sidney, so let's talk about this because the main topic for Josh and I today is what happens now after Scream 7? What is going to, in terms of, and like we already have like a soft rumored announcement that Scream 8 is going to be made after 7 and that it will be a Sidney story. So the thesis of this whole episode that you're going to hear now is what happens now? Is Scream 7/8 the end of Scream as we know it? What's going to happen? Is 7 going to be a 2-part thing with 8? Will we get a whole new trilogy? Will there be a cliffhanger? What will the direction be in terms of like the story? Will there be different directors after Kevin, or will Kevin stick around? What is going on? Like, how should the film approach the meta aspect of Scream? So, Josh, this was your idea. Why don't you kick us off with where your head is at?
Well, I think the main thing that drove me to answer the Patreon survey the way that I did was my own exhaustion with the use of Mindy and the rules in 5 and 6. And I want to preface this by saying that I love the idea of Mindy. I just don't love the execution of her. And I think, plenty of people have voiced that on the podcast. And I was just kind of like, do we need rules anymore? Like, what is this really doing? Other than kind of taking us out of the movie and requiring that a character sort of feels impossibly untethered to reality. Like Mindy suffers so much from those scenes, in my opinion, because all sense of like gravity and emotion and everything just like disappears. And so I think I was kind of thinking like, should Scream abandon the rules element of the movies? And, then you and I started talking, and I think I said that, Randy's the only one that really works for me because just it was perfect casting. The character felt super believable in that moment in time. And that ever since, from four on, it's kind of diminishing returns. I think that more interesting in four than it is in five and six, the way that they execute on it. Now, I think there's probably like a way that they can do it in seven and eight, and I'm sure they will, right? Because this is such a fundamental part of the Scream kind of
But
mystique.
is it? But is it? Does it have to be at this point? I mean, Scream 6, the rules aspect of it, I mean, like, you can literally just cut that scene, cut that 2 minutes of scene with Jasmine talking in the park out of the movie, and nothing changes about the movie. Where it's like, you can't really say the same about the others, even 4 and 5. I mean, 4 definitely not. I think that the rules of 4 and like the idea of the remake in 4 is really important. 5, I'd have to go back with like this specific view, but like, I don't know, like, I just feel like Scream has kind of reached a point where the rules hold it back and the rules feel forced. And what we saw in 6 is not, it kind of works. And maybe they should have, if they really wanted to commit to it, they should have done more in a conversation about it. They should have gone on to talk about how, the franchise was, Sidney not being here actually shows that this is a franchise because it's branching off without her. Like, they could have done a lot more to define the movie as the franchise movie, and maybe Scream 6 would have been better for that. But at the same time, you could look at Scream 6 and think, oh, well, because they didn't do that, they had the opportunity to do set pieces and like allegedly work on the characters', emotional connections. I think that, I mean, I don't think that Scream 6 did a great job with the latter thing, but I think that you could look at future sequels and just see the rules as being this thing that is being dragged around like the ball and chain, and thinking,
Agreed.
if you take that away and just focus on, pure drama and having a theme and a message to the movie, as opposed to having to find some meta commentary about the industry, in terms of like specific types of movies, I think the movie would be better off for it. And like, I think a great example of this is Joey Velisi. Like, he wrote the spec script of Scream 7 for this podcast, and like the theme of that was like motherhood, instead of forcing this some kind of end of the requel trilogy weird
Yes.
theme, like a very weird niche thing that nobody really gets or cares about at this point, and instead it was about motherhood, and it was had so many different iterations of motherhood. Of course, Sidney, Christina Carpenter was the killer. Gail was almost like a pseudo mom to Sam in that script, and you had Martha Meeks almost die. Like, there were very important things about motherhood in that script that kind of replaced the need, I think, for this idea of like, ooh, requel, franchise, remakes, trilogy, and I think that like,
Yeah.
if we focus on the themes more so, and like, let's just quickly recap the themes, then I'll pass it back to Josh. Like, the theme of like 2, in my opinion, is kind of like real life becoming part of media, or part of everything's on stage or being viewed by the public, what we thought was private life. That's the theme of 2. The theme of 3 is obviously Hollywood, and like the skeletons in the closet of Hollywood, and like the corruption of Hollywood. And 4 is like this idea of like social media and technology, and like the way the culture is changing from the previous trilogy. So you have all of that to work with, and that, in my opinion, is what people take away from those movies more than the specific rules about sequels or trilogies or remakes or requels. So Josh, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think that, Scream is always, and Kevin Williamson is going to want to find ways to be meta because that is part of what people love about this franchise. I think you can do that without a character sitting in a circle with a bunch of like potential suspects and victims and talking about, okay, because like the obvious way that they'll crack this in 7 especially will be to have a meta discussion about, like Sidney disappearing for a film and then returning the same way that Halloween did it. Right?
Right.
Like they'll probably reference that. They'll probably talk about the Carpenter sisters, and some feel like, isn't this their story now? Like, or, maybe the killer's trying to make sure it's their story, right? Like there'll be
Yeah.
ways that they'll be able to comment on these long-running franchises where the final girl, for whatever reason, leaves for a movie or multiple movies and then returns, and the rules around that, using the more recent Halloween trilogy as, a template of
Right.
sorts. So I think that that could be a way that they decide to do it. And then I think also because Kevin specifically was always very keen on digging into sort of the larger conversation around these movies, there's probably a lot for them to mine with, how, I mean, they've kind of already done this, but how like fandom can dictate or thinks it can kind of dictate the direction that a franchise goes in, But I'm just not interested in like the rules. Like if it turns
Yeah.
into like, well, when a final girl leaves and then returns, these are the patterns, I'm going to be like, blow my brains out. I don't care.
Like, and I think you also hit on something interesting is like this idea of like having a big group setting. Like that's if that's something about Scream 5 and 6 that I think is weird. I think with 5 it works because it's the first time they're doing it, whatever. But like, with Scream 1, I guess Randy did have a big group, but it wasn't with the main cast. And then like with Scream 2, the rules came in the form of Dewey and Randy at the coffee shop talking to themselves. In 3, it was just the trio watching the video. 4 was the cinema club, slightly different, but kind of, so for 5 and 6 to take on this like mantra that it has to be the entire main cast, all of the suspects listening to the rules intently, I think is weird. And I think it doesn't really work so well. I think with 5, it worked fine. But with 6, it doesn't feel right. So I hope that like if we do get that unfortunate scene that you just described, like and whatever nickname Guy Busick is probably invented for it, that Kevin Williamson's going to swallow and include in the movie anyways. I think that if we get a scene like that, I would rather it be Mindy talking to Chad and Gail, just the two of them, or a small group like that, as opposed to, putting on a production for Sidney, Mark, Tatum, all of Tatum's friends, the school principal, Anna Camp. Everyone's just gathered around to hear Mindy talk. Like I don't buy that. I don't think that's real life. So
And
yeah.
wouldn't it be incredible if like I would like stand up and cheer if that turned out that scene you were describing turns out to just be like Chad and Gail turning to her to be like, okay, like what do we need to know? Like what are these idiots possibly thinking? And her just being like, who the fuck knows? I've been wrong every time. Like obviously this is not the way we're gonna figure it out. Like, Gail, what are you thinking? Like like it would be nice if it just got tossed away
Yes.
rather than, okay, let's figure out like the new formula. Because when you go back and actually analyze what the rules tell us in every installment of Scream, they're constantly being defied, redefined, upended. So it's like not that interesting, especially if we're having to grasp at straws to like determine what the new rules even are.
Right. And like, wouldn't it be cool? Like, so and Joey did something similar to that in his Scream 7 where Mindy does her arc is, Tara dies. And like her first scene post the opening is her talking about how she has always been wrong and she just doesn't really understand this. And she's just she's giving up on that. And there's then a following scene where Mindy tries to do that. And I helped write this scene and I had a funny H2O reference, but Chad gets so frustrated with her and just says, Mindy, shut the fuck up with this bullshit. Like enough. And like that would be my preference almost, just so we can actually have like a conclusion to the rules, like, and I just think that like if we try to force like the I don't know, this some weird nickname describing the 7th movie where the heroine returns, I think it's just too much, and it's audiences won't be able to grasp it, or it's not going to make sense to them in the way that Scream 1, the beauty of that movie was that it was so easy to digest for audiences. And I think that like the rules scene actually work in 2 because it's Randy and Dewey. In 3, it works because it's the trio having this emotional moment, seeing somebody that used to be part of their group that's dead. That works really well. And with 4, we'll talk about 4 in a minute, but like I also think that works. So, but for me, I just think that like whatever it is, it needs to fit in with the vibe of how the franchise is changing.
Agreed.
If not, I think that the best approach actually would be to kind of put Mandy in her place and be like, shut the fuck up. You're never right. And this doesn't make sense.
Yeah, or give Mindy, like for the first time in her, existence in the Scream universe, give her a scene that feels real and human and grounded. And whether it's with Chad or it'd be really fun if it's with Gail. And Gail, I mean, I don't know how, to be honest, this is where I'm not as encyclopedic as you, but I don't know how often like Gail's even seen Mindy spout off about movies, but
Never,
like it
actually,
would
never.
still be. Yeah, so it wouldn't work, but it would be so satisfying for them to have like a really nice moment that feels like an echo of the moment that Gail had with Sam in six, and for Gail to say something very Gail along the lines of like, I like you so much more when you're not talking about movies, or you know what I mean? Like, so it's like self-referential because I can't imagine that. I mean, Guy was still involved in this one, but it's like there's no way that they're not aware that people like so badly want to love Mindy, but you're like not letting us, you know?
Literally, exactly. Oh my God. So, we talked about this like back in our conversation when we were conceptualizing this episode about the Randy of it all and how Randy was kind of like the perfect formula. And that's why he worked so well in the original trilogy and why the cracks in the Randy of it all began in Scream 4. Now, Scream 4 is interesting because they really tried to avoid having the Randy replacement, because there isn't the obvious, like Mindy is so obviously the Randy replacement. Like that kid in the TV show, I forget what his name is, but he is so obviously the Randy replacement. Here, in Scream 4, there isn't the Randy. You have Kirby who could arguably be the Randy. You have Charlie who could arguably be the Randy. You have Robbie who could arguably be the Randy. And it kind of goes to the cast ensemble nature of Scream 4. And now
Right.
I can already feel the listeners like all over the world listening to this and having very strongly divided reactions to that in terms of Scream 4, like either doing it great or doing it badly. I actually, side note, I think Scream 4 is the most divisive movie in the franchise, by the way, but for better or worse, I'm not, so, but like this kind of goes along with it, you could have had a Kirby be the Randy, but she doesn't give the rules in Scream 4. It's Robbie and Charlie. So they kind of share the rules. But for me, I actually really love that scene because I love the setting of it. I love that Sidney and Gail are there in like the midst of all those posters and all those kids.
Yes.
But, so for me, the way that Scream 4 balances it and doesn't try to obviously copycat Randy, I think is really good. It does something different and fresh where I'm on the wavelength. I get it and I enjoy it. So
I would say same for me. And I realized in my rewatch of four that I had completely misremembered it because I think in a lot of the cultural conversation around four and around Kirby and like the lore of Kirby and the extreme fandom of Kirby, I'd almost like rewritten it in my head that like Kirby did have those moments. And then when I rewatched it and realized she actually didn't, what I love about that scene that you're describing is just how like awkward it is that like Gail and Sidney are in this like high school classroom. And it's funny because like even though it's a bunch of actors who are not high school age, you really do feel like it's like these two aunties like standing in film club and like they just both are like you can tell it just the way that Nev Campbell and Courtney Cox played that I thought was just really brilliant because they're kind of giving this vibe that's like I can't believe we're here, why are we here, but also it's important because they're trying to figure out like what these kids are talking about, what they're thinking about, because they know like most likely it's somebody in this room or related to people in this room, and this is how they're thinking, right? So it's like Sydney's kind of like joining Gail in a stage of her investigation in a way that we haven't necessarily seen before. And so that's really satisfying and it makes sense. Like it makes sense as a beat in the movie. Like it works so that they can talk about what's going on in horror. It's in five, I think it works not as well, but it kind of works. Like in the sense that Dewey, the only member of the trio present at that point, is kind of doing the same thing begrudgingly in a sense, but like he feels like okay it's the right thing to do and that's just who he is to like go, these people asked me for my help so I'm gonna do it reluctantly. And he sits through it and sort of learns some things from Mindy's monologue, and then I think it's really six is like that's like wake me up from this nightmare by the time that scene begins with Mindy at on a campus. Yeah.
The campus
Awful.
that they don't talk about, that is not discussed other than like Chad wearing the Blackmore University sweatshirt. Okay, so let's talk more so about what about Scream 7, the future after that, because so again, Scream 8 is already kind of rumored. So I want to run through questions with you. One, would you rather have a two-part thing where 7 and 8 are like part 1, part 2, each in their own individual movies, but spiritually linked, like kind of like 5 and 6 are? Or would you rather have a full new Sidney 2.0?
It just depends. I mean, I'm always gonna be excited for a new one, right? And I feel like I just want it to be I want the vision to be in place. I think this ties into something you teased earlier. It's like obviously this Scream 7 originated with a script written by Guy. I'm really curious to see the extent to which Kevin takes that and makes it his own. And there's just so many politics involved in that, right? Like it's even though he's the OG, he stepped in kind of in this like not last minute, but late stage moment. And I'm sure being a decent human being and also a gay man, not a straight man, he probably felt the need to like be truly collaborative, even if there were elements that might not be exactly what he may have wanted. And so that is like the only thing that gives me pause. Not to say that I don't think that Guy couldn't write a good film. I mean, complaints about 6 aside and very valid ones, like it's really, really hard to know. I think everybody should be wary of blaming a writer for how a film turns out. There can be so many factors from the direction, the acting, like just time constraints. It's in the edit dictated by people that, by the time all that's happening, a lot of times the writer is like not even in the picture. Oftentimes writers are not even welcome on set. So, it's I don't want to sound like I'm saying that I don't have faith that Guy could have turned out a great draft and that Kevin would just come in and sort of be like, okay, let me put my directorial touches on this and we're good to go. But I think I would really want, the same way you've voiced on the podcast, to feel like if we're gonna really get on board with a new Sidney trilogy, like Kevin's really got his grip on it and he has a vision for it. And we just feel like we're in good hands, like definitely not interested in Kevin leaving after 7 and then somebody new coming in for 8 and it's still a Sidney story. I just think that inevitably starts to get messy.
Yeah, I think like the bottom line is, and I think that Spyglass probably knows this. I think that they probably, everything that happened with Scream 7 and the fallout from October of 23 through March of 24, I think that they kind of got a dose of reality about like that they need to take better care of this franchise. And I think the number one way to do that is to trust in Nev and Kevin and prioritize them. I think that as long as Sidney is here, Kevin should be here. I think that if Kevin, in my opinion, they shouldn't be separated. Like whether this is a 2-parter or a full trilogy. And I would just to answer the question I asked you, I would prefer the full trilogy. The 2-parter, it sounds fine, but like just my mind is so programmed not only to like the trilogy structure, but just like the basic like act 1, act 2, act 3, the building to something. And
Yeah.
I think that it should be a full trilogy. And if Blumhouse did it with Halloween, then Scream should have its moment as well. But I don't want a lazy Susan franchise of directors where, we just spin around and somebody else gets a new try. And, the red flags about Guy Busick and James Vanderbilt started for me a long time ago when Radio Silence was leaving the project for Scream 7. One of them said something to the effect of like, oh yeah, Scream always benefits from fresh voices. Bitch, it does not. Like, are you fucking kidding me? I mean, like, Wes Craven directed 4 movies. Kevin Williamson wrote 1, 2, and 4. And frankly, Aaron Kruger worked a lot on 4 as well. So there was almost this weird consistency where, Wes and Aaron and Kevin were the first 4 movies. Like, they weren't switching off someone new every movie. Oh, but that's not the winning formula of this franchise. It worked for the Alien movies, right? You went from Ridley Scott to James Cameron to David Fincher, and that great. That's not Scream. So first of all, you're factually wrong, you stupid PR comment. I don't like that at all. But like, I just, so I very much disagree that Scream benefits from changing hands. In fact, I think it gets worse from changing hands. And
well, it feels like it dilutes, right? Like we lose. I mean, the only way that you end up with a Gale in Scream 6
absolutely
is is because there are people involved that have just lost the thread.
Yep.
Like there's no other way. You can't justify the choices made for that character in 6 at all. The logic holes and the things aside, like Gail had a very like clear arc across 5 movies. They seemed aware of it in 5.
They did.
And then suddenly in 6, it's like, LOL, JK, wouldn't it be funny if we just like have Tara punch her in the face? Yeah. It's like, so it just really, and I know there are people that actually disagree about this, but I just really think that was so off
Well,
specifically.
to be honest, I think that it's the majority opinion that Gail Weathers was not handled well in Scream 6. I think that a lot of people have a caveat, which is that her scene is good, and I would agree. It's the best. It's my favorite part of the movie for sure. But still, like one scene does not a great character arc make. Like there is no denying the fact that there was that the balls were dropped when it comes to Gail Weathers and writing her from the end of Scream 5 when she's in the ambulance to when she picks up the phone in her apartment. That there were many holes in the existing what they were allegedly going for, but also just balls dropped, and that's a huge problem. And like I get this idea of like Gail regressing, that could make sense, but they didn't explain it well enough for it to fall in line with that 1 to 5 arc that you described. So, and you're
Right.
absolutely right. This is like if there was ever something to describe the state of the franchise and why it shouldn't be changing hands all the time, it's because of Gail Weathers. Like, I mean, because like before, something Gail Weathers was something that was lauded about the Scream franchise, about how her transformation from 1 to 4, and then by extension 5, and then for them to do that, it's very insulting. But you and I had this conversation after the movie Drop came out, and I loved Drop. I thought it was like, wow, Christopher Landon really proved himself as like a dramatic director in a way that like I was really not expecting. And a fear of mine is going to be Kevin directs 7, and then Landon gets his turn in with 8. I don't think that should happen. I think that as long as the story is with Sidney, Kevin should be there, and then after this franchise inevitably moves on from Sidney, in Scream, whether that's Scream 9 or Scream 10, I think that's where Landon should have his opportunity. He should be first in line. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was actually excited when he was announced as a fan, and personally, I think he's really talented. When I first really knew that I thought he was really talented was the sequel to Happy Death Day, because I just think that packs a lot more dramatic punch than people remember or maybe realize. I don't know how, if I don't often encounter people in conversation who've seen that film. So I had full faith in him. Honestly, just my gut would tell me that he will probably want nothing to do with being a part of Scream ever again. I think that's probably been steadily ruined for him by shitty people online who need to go touch grass and like live their lives and stop acting like these movies are the be all end all of their entire existence. So that makes me sad for him, really, just because it's like you, me, so many people listening to this, male, female, gay, straight, whatever. It's like we all grew up obsessed with these things. They made us feel a certain way. And even if you're not a creative, like imagine in an alternate universe where you are and you, that person that grew up loving this thing so much, basically gets told like you're gonna get to do this. And like I have chills like even thinking about it. And so it makes me really sad for him that he had this like incredible dream come true moment that he probably like, it's easy to get really jaded in Hollywood. I wouldn't be surprised if that day and the days that followed that he knew he got Scream, he was like just riding on a high that he hadn't felt in years. And so to have that end with death threats to his family and the movie falling apart for reasons that were not in his control and, feeling like he needed to exit is just really sad. Like there's part of me that would love for him to get it, but like only if that makes sense for him. I
Right.
think he went on and made a great movie in Drop, and I think he'll go on and do a lot of other exciting things. My only wish for him would be that if he does get to come back to Scream, he's like really excited about whatever that next chapter is going to be and really inspired. Because
Yeah.
otherwise it's like, why do it? you know.
So first I want to address, like, first of all, it's Pride Month, everybody. It's June. Happy Pride Month. We're two gay men here talking about a gay director. And there was something whenever he was announced. First of all, I was just so happy to be done with Radio Silence. Like, the Scream 6 burned me so much with Radio Silence. And like, I can't believe that they let that finale stand, and that acting from Dermot Mulroney. Like, there are so many things that I think that I was just happy to be done. And the fact that Landon is a gay man, like that kind of gay, because there's a lot of gay Scream fans. I mean, more than the typical movie franchise.
For
So I
sure.
think that speaks, especially because it's a franchise about final girls, whether that was Gail and Sidney or Sam, it would have been, I think, a cool thing to see a gay guy connecting with those actresses about the final girls. So I was really excited for that. And for me, I feel like Drop is a movie that Chris Landon absolutely needed to do to show what he, first of all, to expand his skills and what he can do, but also prove to everybody, like, I'm not just the guy who makes the comedy horror movies. I can make serious movies too. And I think he really achieved that. So, in terms of like down the road though, I mean, like, we are kind of like pontificating something that is really far away, because like, let's just say they do, let's 7 comes out, they make an 8, let's just say they complete a Sidney trilogy in 9, which is deep down what my gut says and what I think will happen. That's probably going to be over the next 5 years. Then, the franchise is probably going to need to rest a little bit before they introduce a brand new storyline. So I mean, we're looking 10 years into the future. I hope that like whatever that movie is 10 years down the road, it does get somebody like Christopher Landon, who proved himself with projects like Drop, and that we're not just handing Scream off to just anybody, which Joey had comments and concerns about Radio Silence, like whenever they were announced as the directors for Scream 5, like this idea of like, Wes Craven was chosen to do Scream after making Nightmare on Elm Street, all his entire catalog, right? And Radio Silence had made Ready or Not, and basically was like, okay, here you go, here are the keys to this amazing quality kingdom. And like, I hope that whoever gets to do Scream next is somebody with the credibility. Like, for instance, Kevin Williamson, he has walked the walk, talked the talk to get to this moment, to have this opportunity, right? And like, I think that like, going back to like kind of an earlier point too, and I'm going to pass it to you, is like, there is something poetic in this idea of like Wes Craven being the creative force of Sidney's first trilogy and Scream 4, then Radio Silence holding the Carpenter sisters, just their movies, and then Kevin possibly doing this next set of movies with Sidney. I think that whoever it comes next should be somebody who is super qualified, which someone like Christopher Landon, by doing movies like Drop, shows that he is. And I want it to be something completely fresh, where whoever comes after gets to do their own thing and have their own universe, if that makes sense. So
I
Josh?
agree. Yeah. I think it would, like, just even if they do 7, 8, and 9 as Sydney centric stories and the people, in her close orbit, it would be really cool to give the franchise to somebody other than a white straight male to take it in a new direction. And that could be with the Meeks, if like they're still alive at that point in time. That could very much be like spinning it off with a character that we meet in this trilogy. It could be a return to the Carpenters in another universe, right? Like, whatever it is, I think it would just be really fun to have somebody overqualified by sheer fact that they've been wanting to do this and have so many ideas. Like, the people out there with real talent, like Joey, that have like better ideas and unfortunately in some cases end up on screen. Like, give some of those people the keys to the castle. Like, let's get a director of color, let a woman direct Scream. Like, how fucking cool would that be to see like what those scenes of character development, and how like the women in the franchise, who are really like the core of it, move through rooms and move through these situations. Like, how would it look and or feel different? And look, it's not to say that I think women have been like horribly misrepresented in this franchise. I don't think that at all. I think it's clear that the women involved, specifically Nev and Courtney, have had a lot of say, and it's been collaborative and whatnot. But I do think it would be really interesting to have a non-white director, a female director, like, so that these points of view do make a difference. And it would also be really interesting to, I know we kind of had it in the Carpenter sisters, but Jess made really good points in your most recent episode about how nothing about their status as Latinas felt fully lived in, in that film. And I think that that's 100% valid and accurate. I think like visually, to a degree, it achieves something for representation, but they're obviously, both women who kind of like in their own way pass. So it was easy enough for the film to kind of gloss over that aspect of who they were. So it would be cool to see Scream actually go in a totally new direction in like a 10, 11, 12 universe where we're actually asking the slasher like to decide what it would do with a protagonist that we've never seen in the format.
I know, I think that makes a lot of sense. And like, actually, when Joey and I did that Scream 7 script, the person we kind of envisioned as the directing it was Karin Kusama, just because
Mhm.
she did a movie called Destroyer with Nicole Kidman. In that movie, Nicole Kidman plays this grizzled, dark cop, LA cop. It's like a film noir type, and it's amazing. But there's a huge theme about motherhood, so that was our kind of connection there. And she does genre films. You know, she did Jennifer's Body, of course. So someone like that, I think, would be really cool for Scream. But okay, Josh, there's three things I want to hit with you, and then we're gonna wrap up. So, okay, one. How do we feel about a cliffhanger ending of 7? I am a huge no, but what are you?
I'm open to it, mostly because I really just want them to shock us with a bunch of new things. Like I
Mhm.
want to be come out of it being like, "Whoa, that felt so different than any of the Scream movies that came before it." And so I'm open to it because I am a little bit sick of the like, "Okay, here we go, unmasking. They're dead. They're not dead." Like,
Yeah.
like it would be compelling as fuck to leave Scream 7 not feeling like everything's okay. Because we know it's not going to be anyway.
Right.
Of course, there's going to be an 8, and there's going to then have to be new killers with a slightly new motive. So, like, why not skip that and just end the film in a way where it doesn't necessarily need to be a cliffhanger. I wouldn't put it that way,
Mhm.
but where we're not just like left with this false sense of peace,
Right.
the way a lot of the films end.
Well, that's actually a good way of putting it. Like, I don't necessarily want like a cliffhanger, like where we don't know the identity of one of the ghost faces, or there's something like where there's a literal question mark. You know, I went there. I
Mhm.
like the idea of things not being sewn up and possibly like questions being asked. I think I'm okay with a question being asked. That's not where Scream 7 can't be watched by itself. I want it to feel like I can sit down and watch Scream 7 and it's a complete movie, and then watch Scream 8 and it kind of lingers into it. Great, but I don't necessarily want to feel like that Scream
Oh,
7 and Scream 8 are dependent on each other. So that's
yeah,
what I,
I
yeah.
get I get that because like as a fan, you don't want to feel like, oh my, because the fear then is, what if this is it? What if this is the end? And so I can't imagine there'd be a world where they would do that if they weren't certain they were going to make 8.
Okay. So the last two questions involve like the fact that we have, Sidney, Tatum, Gale, and possibly, I mean, there's always a chance that Sam does come back. So my first question to you is like, how would you see Sam if Melissa was able to work things out with Spyglass or whomever, or if she wants to come back and if Kevin wants her to be a part of the story, how would you see her as operating in a Scream 8? Like for me, I would be fine with Sam as in Scream 8 because you could make her a suspect because of the buildup of 5 and 6 and like how much she enjoys killing and like the ending of 6, right? Like I think that she could actually be a compelling suspect in a way that we've never seen before as a returning character.
Yeah.
But I don't think that she should be. I don't think that magically 8 should come around and she's the main character again, while Sydney's still kind of operating in the universe. I think that like
No.
that's too much switching.
Yeah, I agree. Look, a lot of it depends on what happens in 7 and who's left standing and where Sydney is at from like a dramatic standpoint. Like how much, if any, like how much has her family suffered from 7? Is everyone left standing, or has she potentially lost a husband and or a daughter along the way? I think that's gonna, if they go that dark, that's gonna be pretty intense. And then I could see Sam returning in an all hands on deck way in 8. Like
Hmm.
we all need to rally around her as like kind of like a feral protector, I guess, would be like Gail get to the bottom of it while Sam just like stands on guard ready to stab the shit out of anyone who tries to fuck with Sydney.
I like that idea. I like that.
Yeah, because like we do have slightly different readings about like what they were doing with Sam and Six. I choose to sort of see it as more of like a reclaiming of the robe and the mask and a redefining of it. Like, no, you're gonna die and you're gonna die brutally, you piece of shit. And like, how dare you kind of invoke my horrible father who haunts me to this day, who's like ruined my life, ruined my sister's life. I know that it was not like perfectly executed on, but I see it more that way than Sam descending into like madness and becoming Darth Vader.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
like that reading. I really like that reading.
yeah.
How dare you? That's actually the next time I watch that scene, I'll watch it through the lens of like Sam basically asking, "How dare you, sir?" So,
Yeah, okay. In a very like full house tone.
oh wow, that wasn't where I was going, but yeah, sure.
Yeah. But no, I like look, I just have a thing for like Sam. I like the character. I relate to her. I'm not in a murderous sense, but really just like grappling with like the good and bad within yourself, not knowing like how much you are like somebody or not like them, and when is something okay and when isn't it, and how much can you control your bad thoughts and how much can't you. Like, I think that there's a lot in there that's really, really interesting, and it could be actually really fun to see that character return,
Mhm.
but maybe in more able hands.
No, you're right. And like Circa Scream 5, I was like a Sam fan when a lot of people weren't. And everything that you kind of described there is good. And I just think that I could see a world where she fits into the picture. I just think that like as long as Sidney remains the focus and she's driving the arc and Sam is there, in support of her, but also that would also give the franchise something so cool to have like a developed character. Think of like, you could give Sam like this screen time of a Gale in Scream 2 or a Scream 4 while making her a suspect given the circumstances of everything and her connections to Gale. And like, so I think that there's stuff you could do there. So my last question here for you is the question of Sidney's daughter, whose name is, I guess, Tatum. So how do you see Tatum factoring in here in terms of not only Scream 7, but Scream 8? There's a lot of people who assume, oh, well, she'll just be like the Star Wars Rey character, the one who takes over for Sidney. And I don't think that's what they're doing here. It could be that she has more of a driving force in the sequels, but like the way I see Tatum is like kind of like Josh Hartnett in Halloween H2O, where he is important. And that's a defining part of that story in that movie is Laurie and her son. I think it will be pretty much a mirror image of that. Or, if anything, just like slightly more in a increased role like Allison in the Halloween trilogy that Blumhouse did, where I loved the character of Allison. So I think I could see her being something like that. But my gut tells me that they're going to localize her just a bit more to be kind of like the Josh Hartnett. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I could see that. I would be really surprised though if an inherent aspect of Tatum's character is as like a dramatic foil to Sydney. I mean, it just seems crazy to give Sydney like a high school age daughter and then not have them at odds and have that going on as all of this begins. And suddenly it's like mom and daughter who struggle not to I don't see them like hating each other and it being some like horrible family dynamic, but I'm sure plenty of people listening can relate to that mother-daughter thing that happens in the teenage years and like the tension, fighting, the back and forth, the resistance to how alike they are, and maybe Tatum isn't a lot like Sydney was, maybe she's more like Tatum was or in the first film, hence the namesake. Either way, I think that would give Nev a lot to do and make the film from like Sydney as a mother perspective really rich. And then as I've said, and I think Jess said something like this on one of the group Zooms, like I'm just dying for like the Auntie Gail of it all. And like I love the idea that Tatum likes Gail more than she likes her mom right now. And that like in a weird way, Gail has to come in to help like rein Tatum in and make her understand that there's like a way to walk through this and
Yeah.
that maybe she needs to listen to her mother from time to time. So I think there could be really cool stuff. I see that happening. And if that character survives, it'd be really interesting to watch her go from like being completely just sort of in denial about the legacy she's been born into like Scream 8, 9, where she's now having to like fully accept it, live in it, and get savvier and savvier by the day.
Wow, you kind of just made me excited for this character, if she survives, that her potential in future sequels of being different, like being like Sidney but different. And also you have to remember there are 2 other little girl daughters allegedly that are out there. So she'll maybe in like 8 and 9, Tatum will feel protective of her in the same way that we've seen Sidney be protective of Jill, of the Carpenters, of her own family in 7. So there's that, and like kind of what you could do with that character and shape her over those films. That's really exciting. And I love the idea of like Gail calling Tatum a bitch, like stop being such a bitch to your mother. But like also like what you said, but like also like what you said, I didn't think about that. Like Gail would be the one to bridge them or like bring them together, help them. That's actually so beautiful considering Sidney had beef with Gail, in the beginning.
Yeah.
So.
I think I said this a long time ago on a Zoom, but I'm just going to keep saying it, hoping that I somehow manifest it. But I like love the idea of Gail saying to Tatum, like, does your mother hit you sometimes? Like, I know she can be abusive. Just like all the ways that Gail would bring humor into like the darkness, like that. I just like really want her to be firing on all cylinders. And I could totally see it being really fun to like watch her be like the cool aunt to one of Sidney's daughters who's just like, my mom is the worst.
Oh
I
my
feel like
God.
Gail would love that. Like she would really struggle not to get joy out of that.
Oh, totally. That'd be so fun. Oh my God. Wow. So, Josh, this was such a cool conversation. Thank you so much for all of your insights about the future of Scream and just everything you shared about your ranking and stuff. So, listener, I hope that you enjoyed my conversation here with Josh. Our Gale episode will be coming out in a few weeks, so please stay tuned to that. And again, like it's going to be something that's like kind of all encapsulating about Gale in the movies that have come before, but also really looking forward to what could really happen with her in 7 in a real way, not just like the superficial kind of like, oh, she gets a call from Dewey and AI. No, like we're talking about kind of like her direction. So please stay tuned for that. I hope you enjoy this conversation. If you have any thoughts about what could come next with Scream 7, please drop it on a comment on the posts or in a direct message or in the group if you're a Patreon. We would love to hear any feedback to anything we said here. So, Josh, where can they find you online?
Really just on Instagram these days. It's at Josh G. Reinhold.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next segment of Scream with Ryan C. Showers. I'm your host, Ryan C. Showers. Thank you for joining me for this segment. It's time for some Taylor Swift music. So, Ash, what is the Taylor Swift song of the day?
The Taylor Swift song of the day is track 13 off of Fearless, which came out in 2018 and then 2021, and it is Change. Now, this song, I love this song so much. It was produced by Taylor Swift and Christopher Rowe, and Tay wrote this by herself. And I love this song so much because it has a really youthful optimism, but it also, I feel like you could relate it to so many things going on in the world right now. But you could also relate it to just like something doesn't go your way when it comes to your job, or if you were in high school and you don't get the part in the school play that you wanted. And it really just is about change and how you go about that, and how change can be a scary word, but a really optimistic word too.
Yeah. That's a beautiful way of saying it. Oh my God. Wow. How am I supposed to follow that up? But no,
I'm really impressed with that. Thank you, me.
And how much of a dork am I that you said, oh, this is track 13,
I love it. I know. I wrote it and I was like,
Oh my God. So, okay, everybody, if you don't know, Taylor Swift's favorite number is 13. So there you go. But okay, so, this song, I love this song. Every time I listen to it, it just lifts me up, and it has like this like rock and roll, like this smash of like adrenaline and just feel good vibes. And like Ashley said, there is something like there, you can look at it like big or you can look at it small. And like I think that like you can almost metaphorically like make it into like a political statement. like big structural change, like overthrowing something by a popular will, or you can just look at it on a very small scale, which is just like, improving yourself or self-care or doing something to break bad habits and like better yourself. I love it. It's vague enough, but it's so empowering, man. So I need to just read off some lyrics here. My favorite thing about the song is the line goes, these walls that they put up to hold us back will fall down. This revolution, the time will come. And then towards the end of the song, she changes the verb tense and it says, instead of, that the walls fell down, and instead of this revolution, the time will come, she says, it's a revolution. It's a revolution, and it's just like, I think that it's just such an uplifting song.
No, I completely agree. Like, my favorite part is when she says, I think it's the second verse, she says, we've been outnumbered, rated, and now cornered. It's hard to fight when the fight ain't fair. We're getting stronger now. Find things they never found. And they might be bigger, but we're faster and never scared. And then later she says, tonight we'll stand and get off our knees, fight for what we've worked for all these years. And the battle was long and the fight of our lives, but we'll stand up champions tonight. And I love that because I've used this song mostly when I'm posting about like a political thing or something, because I really do hope that even in really dark times when somebody doesn't feel like there's anything going on, that when it feels like there's so many people that are against you, there are a lot of people that stand with you. And it's hard to see that sometimes. Like, it's hard to actually see that through all of the gross, vile things that might be happening. But when you actually look, there are a lot of really beautiful people that want there to be optimism and good in this world and really do fight for each other. And that's what they care about. And I feel like that this song really takes that and just shouts it to the rooftops. And I love how she wrote this when she was really young. She would have been in her like late teens, I'm assuming, when she wrote this song. And I really love that because I think there really is an optimism that youth has that sometimes can be like, sometimes when you're a little bit older and jaded, you kind of like roll your eyes at, but it's also like such an important thing to continue to hold on to as you get older. It's just being like, when I was 16, I would have been like, fuck this. Like, and what would I have done then and how would I have felt? And I think we see that everywhere. And like, I mean, talking about like a revolution, like, I mean, that can always happen for the positive is what we're going for. And I just think it's such a beautiful song to just give a little bit of hope when there's dark times. Like, I mean, I've heard people relate this to like having issues with like addiction or being in a relationship that wasn't good for them or whatever it is. And they just feel like they can, like, maybe the battle is just like a battle between themselves and their mind or whatever it is. But I love hearing how this song has always inspired people for a good. And I think that's probably what she was going for.
Also, I just want to take a moment and describe why I chose this song. It's twofold. One, because there's been so much change that happened at the podcast in the past year, and this episode is kind of like a recap. This is like a season finale of the show, even though there's still a couple more episodes to go before we formally start season 5 of Scream with Ryan and Sea Showers. There's been so much change over the past couple of months. Albert, my editor, left and I took over the editing. We have an extra show every week. We have audio commentary episodes for the Patreon bonus episodes, as opposed to the old school, what we used to do with Patreon episodes every month. TJ Jones came on and started doing graphic design for my podcast instead of the GIFs I was using before. And like, I am so thrilled with that. And you, my friend Ashley, you have helped me manage the Patreon. And like, we started doing this Taylor Swift segment every episode. And like, just as a little fun extra thing, like my friend Justin said, it's kind of like having like a coffee at the end of a big meal, or like a cappuccino, like something like really fancy, like with your dessert. So I love that, and there's just been a lot of different things we've tried to do with the podcast recently, and I'm really happy about it. And like, there's been so much change with the podcast, but also just think about it in like terms of Scream. There was change after Scream 4. We went into the radio silence era and leaving the Wes Craven era. And I think that what the song also represents is like this idea about like, when one thing is over or one thing is starting to run its course, something else will happen and take it over the reins and take over the momentum. And like, it can be good and it can be bad, but like there is oftentimes always room for change. And like, there was change from the original trilogy in Scream 4 to Radio Silence. And now there was change from Radio Silence back to Sidney, and Kevin Williamson gets an era. So everything changes, and usually change is good, because sometimes whenever it's not meant to be, things change back. And, so everything always works out. And I think this song is so exhilarating and kind of represents both like the past couple months of the podcast, but also the new era of Scream with Nev back at the center and getting to meet her family, so it's going to be really, really cool. And Kevin Williamson changing from being a writer to producer, now the director, like that is change. These things will change. So I prefer the Taylor's version to the original. Here, this is one of like the songs I think that is like you most need the Taylor's version, as now we can juggle both, the master and the re-record. But I would definitely recommend go to the Taylor's version of this song. And like within this episode, I mean, Josh Reinhold, we're talking about the idea of changing the franchise and how what happens after Scream 7, and the idea of the rules. Like, do we need the rules anymore? And like the change away from the rules. We talk about that. We talk about the way that if Sam ever returns, like how she will be changed in terms of like, being the protagonist to, I think, what will be a supporting role, or just how the next era is so unknown to us, and that there is a big change happening with Kevin at the helm and Sidney being back as the main character. Like there's a lot of good positive change that we don't know what's to come yet. So that's what's kind of fun about this song, because what's happening in the song is like the song, you're experiencing the change along with the narrator, and we're kind of in that moment of experiencing and undergoing the change. So there you go.
Also, I don't know if people know, but Taylor was somebody who was told at a pretty young age that she should just stay out of politics. She should stay out of let everybody have their own opinion. And she says that something she really regrets is that she wasn't more vocal and didn't use her voice in the way that she thought, or the way that she wanted to. But she was literally kind of told, like, sit down, sit pretty, and just like sing. Like, just shut up and sing. And she thought that was like the right way to go. And she's later said that like she wished that she had realized that her voice could have been really important in certain times. And I think this might have been her way of expressing that. Mm-hmm. Without expressing like her actual opinions on things. And I really admire someone saying like, I regret that I wasn't part of this conversation earlier.
Ash, any final thoughts?
No, I encourage everybody, like if you're having a bad day or feeling really just feeling like the world is just falling apart or something's like not going your way, maybe give this song a listen and just like put it on in the car, like sing it really loud or in the shower, and just hopefully it will make you feel a little bit more optimistic, because holding on to that hope is also really important.
Yeah, I agree. So Ash, where can they find you online?
You can find me at SquirrelandSpud9 on Instagram. There you will find my Etsy shop and all of my silly opinions on movies and TV shows and lots of Taylor Swift stuff, my cats, and our weekly Scream game of the week, which is super fun. And we've got a lot made. And my favorite thing is seeing if Ryan gets them. And he usually does now. He's figured out my...
It's been a revolution.
Yeah, it has been. And so I love seeing your guys' answers, and I get so many comments and messages saying how much people look forward to it. So it really makes my day.
Oh, good. We love you, Ash.
Thank you. I love you guys.
All right, everybody, please go listen to Change. And everyone, please stop being so mean to Fearless. I love Fearless so much. So, okay. Everybody, thank you. We'll see you next time.
All copyrighted material used or referenced in this show belong to their rightful owners and made possible by the Fair Use Act.
And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
Get another beer, you want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back!